of us have experienced a day in our lives where we've had to function on very little sleep. We manage as best we can to go about our regular day despite feeling groggy and sluggish, maybe a little mishap here and there, but otherwise it's business as usual. Well, mostly. Oftentimes, we sacrifice sleep in order to fulfill some other, more pressing matter. Maybe it's because you have some really important work that needs to be done. Or maybe it's because you gotta watch just one more episode. Whatever the reason is, sacrificing those 8 hours might be riskier than you realize, especially if you're a student.
Recent evidence suggests that our ability to form long-term memories is heavily dependent on sleep, specifically during non-REM sleep. Moreover, this research has shown that our ability to recall newly learned information is enhanced after a night of sleep, as opposed to trying to recall it the same day that it was acquired. As a result, trying to study all night before an exam might actually be more harmful to your performance than simply choosing to hit the hay instead. In order to understand why this is true, we need to understand some biology basics of sleep. For starters, sleep is characterized by varying stages of light and deep sleep. The epicenter of dreaming, REM sleep, is the lightest sleep we experience, but non-REM sleep, and more specifically, slow-wave sleep, is the deepest sleep we experience, which, as it turns out, is vital for our brains to carry out memory consolidation. During deep sleep, electrical bursts originate in the learning and memory center of our brains, the hippocampus, and propagate to various other regions of the brain. This activity was coined as sleep spindles. These spindles are extremely important because they are the direct result of memory reactivation occurring during our sleep. In other words, our brains are quite literally rehearsing the information we learned during the day and committing them to our long-term memory during the night.
In light of this discovery, it's no stretch of the imagination to say that sleep helps you study. Now, this doesn't mean that taking a nap is a better alternative to doing your homework. It doesn't quite work like that. Instead, think of everything you learn as planting a seed. In order for that seed to grow, it needs sunlight and water. Remove one of these ingredients, and it will never survive. Just the same, adequate rest and studying are necessary to cultivate a strong neuroplastic mind. Which brings me to my next point, sleep and neuroplasticity. First, let's define exactly what it means to be neuroplastic.
Neuroplasticity describes the adaptive capacity of our brains to acquire new information by physically rewiring and reconstructing neural pathways. Our brains are essentially a very complicated highway system, one with many roads, arteries, on-ramps, and off-ramps. The highway system of our minds, though, are not static like the highway systems that make up our everyday transportation. Instead, you can sort of liken them to the staircases of Hogwarts that can shift and change. These shifts and changes of the physical structure of our neural pathways, and more specifically, the synapses that make up the neural pathways, account for a very real shift in our everyday cognition. Every time you learn something new, you are encouraging this reconstruction behavior. And every time you get a good 8 hours of sleep, these shifts become stronger and more consolidated via the rehearsal activity that occurs during deep sleep. However, it's important to take heed that not everything you learn during the day is going to become a new road in your superneural highway during the night. You see, synaptic activity is very expensive. In fact, our brains take up about 25% of our total energy consumption just to maintain normal functioning. This means during the day when we are learning, our brains, and thus our synapses, are active to the point of exhaustion. A consequence of this is that when we sleep, our brain activity is greatly reduced. This phenomenon is the basis for my third and final point, the synaptic homeostasis or SHI hypothesis. The SHI hypothesis essentially states that during reduced brain activity at night, neural pathways follow the rule of survival of the fittest. This means that only the strongest neural connections become consolidated, whereas the weakest ones are eliminated. Our brains simply cannot afford to keep them. This is why studying is so important. You need a strong foundation for new neural connections that your sleeping mind will deem worthy of keeping. Though this may seem daunting, this synaptic filtering when we sleep is actually really good for our brains. It helps us think clearer, retrieve information more easily, and reduces information interference during recall. Therefore, if you're struggling to understand some concept during the day, a good night's rest may actually help untangle those knots in your comprehension.
It seems like every day science is discovering a new benefit of sleep. Don't underestimate it. Now, let's recap some of the things we've learned. Sleep makes us better learners because
slow-wave sleep plays a pivotal role in memory rehearsal and consolidation. Sleep improves our neuroplasticity. And lastly, the SHI hypothesis provides that sleep refreshes our mind by strengthening our existing neural pathways and eliminating weaker ones that clutter our thoughts.
Believe me when I say that these are just a few of the many reasons that sleep is good for our brain. So although it might seem tempting to pull that all-nighter before the big exam in the morning, do yourself a favor and get those 8 hours in instead. Your brain, and most likely your grades, will thank you for it.